Good morning, everyone, and you're very welcome to this term 2 of Enterprise University. Just to introduce myself, I'm Sharon Mulligan, product expert here with Enterprise, and you're very welcome this morning wherever you are in the world. And of course, if it's your first time to join us on this learning journey, you're very welcome, and we hope that you find something useful from the first session today. So I'm just going to start off by sharing with you what we're going to cover in our first lesson today. So today is all about CRM and sales. So everything within Enterprise that you need to get up and running in order to manage your sales and of course your leads and prospects within Enterprise. So just to share a little bit of housekeeping, as always with these particular lessons, they will be recorded and the repository of recordings will be made available to you on our website, which is on enterprise.com. Click on resources and then the university to access those recordings. And we will let you, of course, as soon as they're available on the website, which will be either later today or certainly by tomorrow morning at the latest. So just to give you a rundown of what the curriculum is going to look like for the 10 sessions ahead on term 2. So quite a lot of detail and information will get covered over the 10 lessons. You can see here we start off with CRM and sales, moving then on to services in 2 weeks' time, and then on to procurement and purchasing, everything purchasing, and of course then on to accounting, banking, with all the payments and bank feeds with your bank accounts. We'll have multiple lessons around stock, which I will refer to as well during today's lesson and make you fully aware of what we will cover. And of course, some of the information will be touched on. And of course, there's more to follow over those 10 lessons. We'll have a lesson, of course, on expenses, on production, and of course, on reporting as well. It's important that when we look at today's lesson, which is all about the data and it's all about getting the right data into the system, the important thing at the very end of all of this is, well, how do I get the data out and analyze that correctly within the system? And of course, as I've said, this session is fully recorded, so you can certainly catch up on it at a later time again to remind yourself of the key pieces of information that you need to be aware of, obviously, to utilize this within your own organization or perhaps within your own role. And that's the great thing here about the university, is that we have detailed all of the modules based on the functions within Enterprise. So maybe your role is only around procurement and stock, so you can focus in on those key lessons. But you can sign up for all 10 and get access to those, of course, over the term. So today's lesson, what is it going to be all about? So obviously it's about the master data, the importance of any system, regardless of if it's Enterprise or whatever it is that you've used in the past as well. The importance of any system is the raw data, is the data that you input into that system. If the data going in is not correct, how are you going to analyze that? How are you going to get the most from your system if it's not right to begin with? So I would suggest that you spend some time, particularly if this is your first time to use Enterprise, to make sure that the raw data going in, that is your customers, your suppliers, your prospects, your stock items, to make sure that information as it goes into the system is going to work for you. Of course, there's lots you can do to build on that information as you start to utilize the system more and more. But I think it's important that you understand the value and the benefit of having the right master data in your system. So again, we'll talk about the importance of that data. We will look, of course, at defining customers and prospects and what that gives you within the platform. We will then go on to CRM with leads, the pipeline and the dashboard. And again, being able to track and monitor prospects as they move through the pipeline. We will look at the sales transactions flow, and I think it's always important to start at the very beginning for everybody to understand what each of the transactions are and what effect they will have on the system, because the assumption is that I add an order in the system and it's going to post something maybe perhaps to my accounting, but that is actually not very true. So it's understanding the implication of, well, if I add a quote, what actually happens within the system? Am I posting to my P&L, or is that only at the delivery stage? And of course, ultimately, the invoice. So understanding all of the transaction flow as you start to use the system. And of course, we will touch on the sales dashboard and a little bit of the initial setup as well, of what's involved before you even start using sales within the system. We will also talk about the advanced sales. So this is an underutilized, I really believe it's probably an underutilized area of the system where you could take advantage of being able to bulk process transactions, particularly when it comes to emailing or printing or, obviously rolling out statements and emailing those to your customers. And as well with the advanced sales, we're looking at recurring transactions, and then we're looking at the resource planner. So how do you plan out your deliveries and your sales orders? So there's so many elements that you can bring in to the whole sales arena. So it's important that you're aware of what functionality is actually there and how to get the best out of it. We'll also touch bases on the customer portal and what that means to you as a provider. How do you get your customers to get more involved in understanding the transactions that are outstanding to them, and of course to get them to ultimately pay the bills. So we'll touch base on the customer portal. And of course, as always, at the end of this particular session, we will open up the floor to a Q&A. So you'll have the opportunity to pop in some questions into the chat. Do that throughout. I won't be able to answer those until the very end, but if there's something that comes to your mind, do feel free to add that into the chat. And if time allows us at the end, we'll try and get through as many questions as we can. So enjoy the journey. Try to take on board as much as you can, and as I said, as much as that's relevant to you, your role and your organization. So let's just do a quick master data overview. So this is just touching on the different types of master data. And this is what we have available currently within the system. So of course, customers. Why do we need customer data? Well, it's required to record and track all the sales transactions. So everything that you process through sales and through your CRM is important to your customers. Even if you're a service industry and you're only going to use the service module, for example, you're going to need that right customer information in the system ahead of using the service module. So customers are important, and the data that's contained within those customers is something to consider before you roll it out within the system. The same, of course, with your suppliers. So the whole journey of procurement, when you're trying to reorder and replenish stock, or perhaps that you're taking in third-party services from another provider. So you want to record and track all of your purchase transactions. So again, taking you through from order right through to purchase delivery, to purchase invoice, and of course the reordering, which is again in line with, for example, if you're manufacturing or production, where we have the MRP to replenish and reorder stock through your suppliers. So that's something we will touch on in great detail further down with purchasing, with the production module itself. But the supplier data ahead of time is important as well. You will find as well today through the live demonstration, I will touch base on a lot of the new key features that we've introduced this year to make collection of this information even better between your customers and suppliers, and especially around the stock element. So I'll touch base and remind you of what those key or new pieces of information are during the live demonstration today. In relation to master data, so we continue on here with your prospects. So for everybody, we want to be able to record and track where are those prospects going to lead to. We're going to bring that right the way through CRM on the pipeline, track it all the way through to a sale, and ultimately, of course, turn that prospect into a customer. So there is lots of key information that you can record against that prospect. Just to mention here, obviously, with those three primary master data, the great thing here is even with the standard fields that we have within Enterpryze, you can add customized information through what's called custom fields. So if there's additional key pieces of information that you want to record against any of your master data, you can populate those on our custom fields, and they can be then, of course, exclusive to your organization and needs. And of course, contacts. Contacts are important. Who do we reach out to when we're dealing with and liaising with our customer? Who are the primary contacts? Perhaps the contact has changed each year and it's ensuring that those records are up to date. So contacts are important because, of course, you record information such as activities against those contacts. You can assign those contacts to transactions so that as you're dealing with a particular customer, if a certain contact has contacted you about purchasing a certain item, that you can record that all the way through on the transaction itself and you know exactly who you are dealing with. So contacts are important because it's your direct communication with your customer. So we have an area that you can maintain those contacts and of course report on them and filter on them as you need them through the contacts grid. And of course, last but not least, items, very important data. So whether the items are physical or non-physical, because I've mentioned already that could be that you're manufacturing or production, but you could be a service industry as well. So you will need to be able to record and hold the right information against your stock items. So lots more to come, of course, around the items itself when we come to the items module, which I mentioned. There's 3 lessons around items because it obviously encompasses quite a range of information. So the importance of master data, I think I've mentioned it all there, even just in that presentation, in that particular slide. It's to ensure the correct recording of transactions. From a sales perspective, you can take sales, receive payments. For procurement, record purchasing transactions and make payments then to your suppliers. You can save time by importing that master data. So this is a key piece for setting up the system from the outset. We have a file importer, which is very simple. We provide you with Excel templates where you can go into the file importer, download the Excel template, review the fields that you require to fill in, and then basically just populate that with your data. It's as simple as that. And then it'll save you the time. You can then simply import that. You can also update or import new data. So for example, you may have been up and running on the system, for example, for a few months, but now you've got a whole new, let's say, a whole new block of items that you want to bring in. That's a whole new item line that you're going to be selling to your customers. So absolutely, you can now go into the file importer and bring in those new items to the system at any time. You can update existing master data as well. So for example, if you needed to update a number of customers or suppliers with certain information, you can also do an update through the file importer. So again, all about key here is to save you time manually inputting that particular data. So again, we can see here we can import customers, suppliers, stock items, non-stock items, your contacts. So if you've got multiple contacts, we can get those imported as well. So the customer journey. So I think it was just important just to show you overall here about the customer journey. So this is for your new and existing customers as you add them into the system. So with your customers, you can add the customers, the prospects. We know that we can track all the transactions. We can track the revenue. More importantly, we can track all the communications, so all the activities. The great thing here in the system is that you can monitor all of those activities and you can monitor all of those transactions by receiving notifications. And you can do that very easily by following the transaction on the system once it's been added. So if you're in a particular role where you need to monitor, for example, all the orders going into the system, you can specify to be notified of all new orders that are added or just your own, or if you want to follow a specific order to see that come through to invoicing, you can get notifications and follow it through as well. Same with CRM, same with obviously all the sales transactions, so going from quote to cash. Scheduling orders and deliveries, I mentioned that already around the resource planner, so being able to manage that in full. Set recurring postings. So what if you're a service industry like ourselves and you need to set reminders and to ensure that customers are invoiced, for example, monthly or quarterly or half yearly or yearly, for example, and you want to make sure that they are invoiced at a certain time. So you can have recurring invoicing that can be set up and scheduled for you in advance and to ensure that those invoices are posted automatically. And then of course, statements, being able to manage those easily and get those out in bulk, for example, to your customers. And that's the area I mentioned around the advanced sales, and that's where that will come in. And the customer portal. So I've mentioned that already. So this is where you're going to give your customers the ability to manage their own bills. So for example, they'll be able to manage their own service calls. So there's certain information they'll be able to see against the service calls. They'll also be able to add a new service call. They'll be able to add an order. That's if you give them permission to do so. Pay bills. And of course, approve quotes as well. Approving quotes is something that you can do directly from the quote itself through the actions menu. You can send for approval, and your customer will receive a link via email where they open up the quote itself and they will get a button to approve or not approve. And again, it's another great tool of communicating directly with your customer, but also giving your customer the ability to manage the data that you've already posted against their account. So it's giving them a look-in without a login to Enterpryze itself. It's giving them the ability to view and review their transactions. But of course, as always, with everything in the system, there's certain settings that you have to have in place to make that work for your customers. So just to give you an overview of customers and what we get in terms of the data record itself within the system. So Enterpryze gives you a full 360 view. So all the activities that happen for your customer, all the balances, all the different types of transactions. And you'll have buttons that will take you through just to their list of transactions. So their invoices, their orders, their quotes, etc. And you will see that on the customer screen. But you can track full customer performance because we have a little dashboard as well on the front of all your customer screens if you haven't seen that already. You can manage all your contacts and activities for all of your customers, and that can be done throughout the system. You can also see where you have saved and managed special prices against your customers. Bringing that element into it now, just to mention that, because that is something that sits currently within the company's menu. Takes you back into items, but that's important because it's all managed directly through your sales transactions. So for example, when you add a sales order, you'll be able to, and for example, you're giving that customer a specific price, you will be able to add that price as as a historic price and see it on the special prices. But you can manage those then within the items menu, and then that's the special price that will be used for that customer going forward. But you can also see historical prices. These are all elements and functionality that have been introduced this year in the system to make the data work better for you. So I'm mentioning all those keywords now so that you're aware of what they are. And of course, intercompany, a huge part of the system that we've introduced this year. And this is to make managing information across multiple organizations better and easier for you. And we do this on two levels. We do this at item level, so where you can replicate stock items across multi-organizations, but you can also view stock availability across multiple organizations. So if an item is set up as an intercompany item, you can then, as you're entering a sales transaction, so this all goes back to sales, as you enter that sales transaction, you'll be able to click on the quantity field to see the stock availability in your current organization. And if you have intercompany enabled, you'll be able to click or tap on the intercompany tab to see, well, where else is this item available? What other companies and what other warehouses can I access that particular stock item? That gives you so much more information, powerful information for the selling journey to ensure that you have sufficient stock available to sell to the customer without having to go through procurement and replenish that unnecessarily, for example. So lots there around intercompany. And of course, on the sales transaction side itself, you can also replicate transactions across multiple organizations. So for example, you can set up your customer to replicate to another customer in another organization, or potentially on the other side, you could ask for it to replicate to a supplier. So if you need that to come through as a purchase document in another organization, you can also do that through the intercompany. We've also introduced this week SLAs, and again, I'm mentioning this now because it's all relating to your customer. So the importance of SLAs, again, if you're a service industry and if tracking response times is important to you, and this, of course, is very relevant to us as you deal with us on a day-to-day basis, for example, on the chat when you're contacting support or if you're emailing in a support query, it's important that we get back to you in a certain amount of time. So if we've got a certain agreement, so an SLA agreement with you to say, well, look, we'll always get back to you within 2 hours or 3 hours, whatever that agreement is, with support, it's important that we can track that time spent on the service calls with the customer and to ensure that we have met those expected response times on the SLA. So I'm mentioning that because one part of the current customer setup is to assign the SLA. I would have gone through that yesterday on yesterday's release webinar. So I'll touch base on that again, but you can certainly get access to the recording, which is on our roadmap page. It's already gone up there this morning, and I will make you aware of where you can find out where all these recordings are, and of course where you can access the product tours, just as important to step through all of these changes. So the customer workflow, just to remind you of what this is, just to quickly step through. In the company's menu, you click on customers. From here, you can obviously add a new customer, but what you get to see in relation to that customer, so this is the part I mentioned already, the overview, the 360. So you've got the account balance that you can drill into, you've got your overdue balance and future commitment, which is your total open orders plus your open deliveries. But more importantly, you've got all the tiles that detail all of the different transactions. Any of those tiles, when they're clicked on, will take you to the grid with a list of those transactions already specific to that particular customer. In addition to that, we've got an actions menu against all your customers, and these are just all quick actions. This is where you can now create new activities, leads, service calls, and you can see a list of all of the options that you can take directly from that customer. And by going into any of those new screens, it takes and populates the customer directly on screen for you. Okay, so moving on, let me just, again, let's look at the prospect. So very similar to a customer. However, the difference with a prospect is obviously we're limited to the type of transactions that we can add against a prospect, because that's all it is currently. It's a prospect. It's a prospective sale, and we want to nurture that and make sure that it's looked after. And I've mentioned already about the custom fields, and this is really where, particularly when it comes to prospects, this is where you can get clever around using those custom fields to ensure that you capture the right information so that it makes reporting easier. So when you go to your leads grid or your prospects grid, that you can capture the right information and bring it through to the leads and ensure that you filter that and of course report on it and analyze it as and when you need it. So this is all held within the prospect button. Again, this is in your company's menu. And from here, the difference here is that we've got a company type. It specifies it as prospect. And of course, the same with any other company, customer, prospect, supplier. You've got your different currencies. Each one of those, of course, are single currency. You can allocate your salesperson, standard contact information, but you can see there you're limited to only a certain amount of transactions. So we've got new activity, new lead, we can create a quote or we can create an order against a prospect. So what if I want to turn that prospect into a customer? Very simply, all you do is you come into the prospect and you can see there on my second arrow where I have company type, you simply just switch that to customer and that's it, and save it. Once it's switched to customer, it can't be switched back. You would of course have to you would actually have to set up a new customer. But don't forget, leads, CRM can look after everything from customers to prospects. So it doesn't matter if they've then turned into a customer and then you've got a prospective lead on your existing customer. You can also manage that through the CRM. So you can see already we're bringing that kind of 360 view with everything. And I did mention at the outset that there is a certain amount of information. I don't mention it all here because there's too many to put on screen, just a couple of key pieces. But before adding, of course, any of those master data items, there are certain things that you have to define in your module settings. There are certain things that you can switch on and switch off. depending on what it is that you require to maintain within the organization going forward. And of course, there are other things that you can switch on and they can follow later on. There's absolutely no problem. We have an auto create on customer code. So that's whether the system automatically creates the customer code for you. And that's based on usually the first 2 to 3 letters of the customer or supplier name. And it'll put a code then in like 01, for example, and generate that code for you. Otherwise, you can leave that switched off and manually input the codes yourself. And of course, items, there's a multitude of things around items, like item groups and categories and warehousing, price lists, of course, and payment terms. What we've introduced actually here, and this goes in line again with your customers, and I've mentioned already being able to manually input your customers or import them. What we've introduced actually this week, we've a new default option. So if you're not fully aware of that yet since yesterday's release, we have a new default button against the price list. So when you go into module settings and go down to price lists, you can now set a default price list for customers. So when you manually input the next customer or import the customer, that will be the price list that will be set as the default price list for new customers or prospects. The same with our payment terms. We've introduced a new column this week, again, to set the default payment terms. So again, you can leave that ticked or not ticked if you want a default set as you define your new customers and your new prospects within the system. And as I said, lots of other module settings as well to consider. A lot of them will be touched on as we go through each of the modules. So bear with us, obviously, there's lots more to come, particularly when it comes to gross profit, because we'll touch on that today as well when we're looking at transactions. So just a quick demonstration here of where those settings all reside. So module settings, so settings option here, module settings, and then you've got a certain amount of settings then, of course, for sales. And I mentioned about the auto create customer code, so you can see that there, whether you switch that on or off. There's lots more settings obviously below that, as I've mentioned before. There's a couple of great new ones that we've introduced as well. In the previous release, we have an option for mandatory reference. And again, I'm bringing this now into conversation because this relates to your sales transactions. So do you want to ensure that your users always populate a reference on every single transaction that they add into the system? Well, yes, you can now make it mandatory, and that's through the module settings. You can switch that on or off as you require. Same again with the purchasing. Again, we can auto create a supplier code. So again, when you're manually inputting a supplier code or supplier into the system, do you want the system to auto create the code? And that's all you're doing there. There's lots more, of course, around procurement and around the settings, particularly around invoice scanning, but we're not looking at purchasing today, but there's lots more to come around those. So let's just talk about very quickly around CRM and the benefits and what you can actually do within the CRM system. So of course, CRM is bringing everything together. So customer relationships are important. So that is whether you're selling to a prospect or selling to an existing customer, how do you look after that relationship, nurture it, and ensure that you've got the right data? So again, we're going back to master data. All times, always come back to the data. Always consider what you're inputting into the system, because what you input is going to only be as good as what you're going to take out of the system then to analyze, to report on. So, for example, when you look at the pipeline and you look at the forecast to see exactly how that's going to progress through the different stages on the CRM, you can bring it from quote to order in one click, obviously through the CRM as well. You're more inventory aware as well from a selling perspective. So I mentioned this already, stock availability and visibility, and whether that's looking at within one organization or looking within multiple organizations, for example, if you have intercompany as well. So you're more inventory aware. So for example, even ahead of time, you can be looking at stock and saying, well, okay, they're not going to be ready to go maybe for another month or two. How are we with stock situation? Okay, that's going to get replenished by the end of the month. I can see there's an open order for that. That's going to come in, and there's actually stock in another warehouse. We're good to go for another few months. So you're very aware then before you even sell the product or service, where availability will be made, will be made available to you. You have lead scoring and qualification, so you can qualify those leads and ensure that, again, based on the customer information that you've potentially stored against those leads, how qualified those leads are. So for SQLs and MQLs, and whatever way that you want to categorize the leads as they come through the system. Analyze them. So sales analytics, so bringing those to win or of course to loss. We've actually introduced something nice around the win or the loss when you're closing out a CRM lead. We've introduced the ability to close all communications, so close all the activities. So you get a user message to say, do you wish to close all activities? Yes or no. And that's something that we've brought in the current release as well this week. And of course, CRM is scalable. It could grow with you. So whatever you need to do in terms of storing information, and I've mentioned a lot of stuff there around the custom fields and making it work for you as well in relation to the data that you have in there. So just a quick overview of what CRM is, where you can take it through in terms of process. So it starts with a lead. Certainly from the word off, you link that to a stage. And of course, this is what you define as your sales process. You can attach it to other documents. I'll show you that in the live demonstration as well. You can record activities. And that's important, and that's around your customer relationships. So it's important to record all the phone calls, all the discussions, the meetings, all the progress. But even at that, it's for other people as well to look in. So if you've got a line manager that's looking in to see how those sales are progressing and there's no activities and there's no records, it raises a lot of questions. So already in terms of visibility and progress, anyone can look in and see exactly how the sale is progressing. And then through the dashboard itself, which is your analytics, you can see and monitor the value of all leads as they come through as well. So lots to cover there in CRM. So a lead, what is a lead? It's simply a record of, a potential sale, whether that's for a customer, an existing customer, a new customer, or a prospect. It doesn't matter. You can record against either or. You can record all the activities. I've mentioned it there already. Progress the sale through all of the pipeline stages, which is very simply done. You can set notifications and follow-ups. So the same as all the sales transactions, you can follow a certain lead as well to see that being notified through your notification center at the top of your screen. You can add quotes and link that directly to your lead. You can link other transactions as well, and of course, add attachments. If there's anything specific that the customer has sent you around what they would love to have in terms of end product, for example, on the lead, you can record those as well, or any particular agreements or conversations or documents that have transferred between you during activity. They can also be attached. So what does the lead workflow look like? So when you add a lead into the system, take it through the pipeline, see it recorded in the notification center, so a new quote created, a new activity, a new opportunity, and of course, ultimately then analyze it in the dashboard. So that's currently how the flow works at the present. So let's just go back a step, because of course this is all in line with CRM and of course all in line with your sales. Just to talk about very quickly the different types of transactions. I appreciate you probably know what they all are, but I want you just to understand what it is that we do and don't do as a result of adding that transaction to Enterprise. So a quote is simply where you send the customer proposal. We know that and we understand that. So whether that's for services or stock, whatever they require. It does not affect the customer balance or financial accounts. So that's important. You can send a quote for approval. I mentioned that already, and that's through or via, it goes actually via the customer portal, but that's very simply done directly from the quote. You can click in the actions menu and send for approval. Very easy and key piece of functionality to take that through very quickly. This can obviously be copied to a sales order, and that's the point at which you commit the stock or service then to the system for that customer. In addition to that, then you can link the quote. So you can see that here. There's a couple of places where you can do that. So for example, we've added a quote and now I want to make sure that that now gets copied to a CRM lead. So I can do that here. I can create a lead to bring in, to link in that quote directly. Or alternatively, this is just the header of a quote here at the bottom. There is an option here to link to transaction. And through that, it's a panel, a WISE panel pop-up, where you can choose the transaction type. Those Wise Panel pop-ups, if you're not yet familiar with them, that's simply our way of giving you information quicker and faster on the system to access and update certain transactions or to view transactional information directly on the screen without having to open up the entire transaction itself. So you'll hear me refer to the Wise Panels throughout every single lesson as we progress. So here's just a quick demonstration. Here's the leads grid. And you can see there on the lead number itself, it's got a clickable purple WISE tag. So this is what we refer to as the clickable purple WISE tag. So it's where we've highlighted the ID or the number of the lead in purple. And when you click on that, then it gives you a Wise Panel pop-up where you can update certain information relating to that particular lead. So without having to open the entire lead itself, you can now directly update the lead from the grid itself. And as you can see here, it's certain information such as the total value, stage, and the closing percentage, the current sales. And the great thing here is when you have it linked to a sales quote, you can, if you update the sales quote, it will also update the value on the lead. So this is the other great thing. When you update one transaction, it will update the other as well. Expected closing date, or if you wanted to add a new comment onto the lead, and it will automatically populate that. You'll see there is a blue button there directly beside the lead number, so 964, and then the little blue box with an arrow. That will take you into the full lead in another tab if you want to open it in full. But all these Wise Panels are key pieces of data that you can simply update directly from the grids as you go. And the same will apply, of course, to your sales transactions. So the pipeline, what does it allow you to do? So we've said that already. You monitor the progress of sales. You can filter on the different stages, the customers, the leads. Using a simple drag and drop, move it to the next stage. You can double click to see the details of the lead. And of course, at all times, you're keeping in sight the end goal, which is to bring the sale through the full sales process and bring that through and fulfill the sale ultimately. So let me just show you here a very quick demonstration. So this is the current pipeline as it stands. Brand new UI that we've introduced this year, just to make you fully aware of that. You can see there's a search panel. There's a salesperson panel. So when you click on any of these options for salesperson, closing month, you've got a Wise Panel pop-up where you can choose the information that's relevant to you on your pipeline screen. You can see the stage details or not, so it extends the stage details. I can click on the new activity button and I get my new activity Wise Panel. So this is where I can actually create a new activity directly from the Wise Panel without having to open up a full activity screen. I can view it by month, or I can view it by stage. And you can see there, it just changes the overview of the pipeline. And then very simply, if I want to take a lead on to the next stage without having to open the lead or review the lead, and I know where it is, I simply grab, you can see there, I click with the mouse, I drag it over to that particular stage, and I get an automatic Wise Panel pop-up to update or add it to that next stage automatically. And now it resides in the next stage straight away. So can you see how easy it is just to quickly maintain the information directly from the pipeline grid itself? I can go across as a user myself. I can see, for example, if I've only been given permission to view my information. And of course, from there, I can also create a new lead directly from the pipeline view itself. So lots of information that you can quickly access directly from the pipeline without even having to directly open the lead itself, particularly where you are fully aware of what that lead contains. Okay, so moving on, as I've mentioned, I see there's plenty of questions coming in. We will have a Q&A session at the end, I promise you. So we will have time to delve into and answer some of your questions that you've asked so far to date, but I will keep going until we get to that stage, if that's okay. Thanks, Amel. Okay, so next up are your activities. So this is obviously a key piece of data within the system. This is your record of communication. So this is where you've had a phone call, had a meeting, or perhaps somebody's going on site. So this is all the activities around your customers, around your leads, around your prospects, and even your suppliers. So all forms of communication can be recorded as an activity. You can as well, just to mention this as well, you can automatically set an activity to be created as a timestamp. So when you send, for example, an order out to a customer, when you email that order to the customer through the advanced emailing option, so this is when you go into your order and you go to send, there is an option there where you can create an activity. And what it does is it records the fact that an email has gone out with that sales order. So already you're capturing key information about that email, that you have sent the order, that it has been emailed, you have a record of who it was sent to and the time and date stamp as well of when it was sent out, without having to go back into your Outlook and review those emails that have been sent out. So you can record that as an activity. So just another key piece of functionality to be aware of as well around activities. You can set tasks for different people as well around your salespeople to progress those deals. So they can be all done through the resource planner to make sure that they've got certain reminders in, certain activities have to be set. They can be seen as well on your home screen. So the first thing when you log into Enterprise, land on your home screen, you can see exactly what notifications are there, what's in the diary, what needs to happen today. And of course, the notification center, you can set that to make sure that you've got the right notifications coming through for yourself on a daily basis. You can set an activity as recurring. So after it has been added, you can make sure that it's been set as a recurring or that it's been set as scheduled into your diary for the day. And I did mention new key piece of functionality that we added literally yesterday morning is auto close activities when closing a lead. So that's where you have, for example, multiple activities added against a lead. You've now brought the lead to a win situation. It doesn't matter if it's win or loss, and you're going to close the lead out. When you close the lead out, you will now get a message to say, do you wish to auto close activities? Yes or no? So that you don't have to manually go in and close out those different activities against the lead itself. So lots of new key functionality that's come into the system. So I also want to show you here, and this is just, again, activities. So when you're looking at any of your transactions, I'm looking at it here on the quotes, but if you have activities added against, for example, any of your leads, we have an activities column on the grid. You can see how many activities. And when you click on the total for those activities, it will give you a Wise panel pop-up to show you exactly what those activities are. And even better still, if you want to go a step further, you can click on the new activity button. And of course, it's going to activate the Wise panel pop-up to create that new activity. So even from the grid itself, I'm accessing the key piece of master data. So I can see against a lead, well, there's 10 activities, but I want to see what they are, what's actually taking place against that lead without opening the lead itself. And I can click on the activity number on the grid itself, see that in the Wise panel, and if necessary, I can create a new activity directly from there. So lots of quick access and data fairly quickly at your disposal to analyze, to filter on, or to access and review. Notification Center is something I've mentioned already from the very outset. This is a very key piece of the platform. Again, I feel maybe underutilized by a lot of our users. So this is important that you understand what the Notification Center is, how you can get notified of changes to documents, of when new documents have been created. So this obviously just ensures better follow-up all around for everybody. So whether you're a line manager or just an end user and you want to be aware of any new activity, track those deals through the sales stages to see when they've come through, that you can get notified of those. So in the Notification Center, you'll see there's 3 tabs. So you've got the notifications, which is all the different transactions that they come through, but that is solely based on what you've defined on the Settings tab. So on the Settings tab, all you have to do is go in there and simply just switch on and off the different transactions that you want to see. Is it only for yourself, which is My, or is it for all? So if you're a line manager and you want to see all. If you only see My, that's down to your permissions within the overall system. So you've been restricted only to look at your own transactions at any one time. The tab in the middle there, which is Following, which enables you to follow transactions. And I mentioned this already, on every transaction in the system. When you click on the actions button, and this goes for your leads as well, and in fact, you'll see the bell. So again, you can see the bell there. You will see the bell icon against all your transactions. When you tap on the bell icon, you're agreeing to follow. So you're subscribing to follow that particular transaction. So anytime there is a change on that particular transaction, you will be notified in the notification center. So it's important to always check that to see if anything has come through. That notification center covers a lot of other transactions as well, particularly on products around product transactions, but primarily around stock taking as well. So that's something I will remind you about once we get to the stock modules. The dashboard, so you've got dashboard that analyzes all of the different leads and KPIs. So the number of new and closed by month. So all the leads that are new and closed by month. The pipeline value by salesperson, KPIs, so important to see what's new, what's lost, what's won, leads this month, for example. Number of leads by source, so where they've been received from, what you've defined as your source for your organization. You've got a calendar as well, of course, that shows you any scheduled activities and opportunities, so that's your little notification center within CRM. And of course, you can drill in to see some of the data as well on the grids directly from the dashboard. So you can see that here. This is your dashboard. There's all the different areas that I've just talked about there. Some of them have different filters that you can apply. You can see they're based on closing month or value or stages or salesperson. The different KPIs, again, you can decide on the 4 KPIs to display at any one time. It's limited to 4. You can look at the leads by source. And again, there's a filter button there that you can specify, well, is that this month, next month, no closing month, or custom. So if you want to specify a custom date range, for example, quotes by salesperson. And again, you've got filters that you can apply there. And of course, the notification center, if there are any opportunities or activities that have any reminders for today. And of course, as always, you can see there on the notification center, there's a plus button. So from there, you can create a new activity. And in fact, you can do so as well from the home screen. When you click on the plus sign, it brings up the Wise panel for the new activity to add it to the system. So let's do a quick run through on our sales and just remind yourself about all the different types of transactions. So you can see there, these are the different types of transactions that we allow you to process within the sales. So we've got sales quote, sales order, sales delivery, sales invoice, ultimately, of course, bringing that to customer payment, which resides in your banking, but you can access that directly from your sales invoice. And of course, your sales credit note. There's another transaction there that I don't mention, which of course is important. It's in between the stage of delivery and invoicing, which of course is your sales return. So if for any reason goods are returned by the customer before you've even invoiced them, so they've reached site and they're damaged, or if they've changed their mind, you also have the ability to copy a sales delivery to a sales return. The great thing with all of these different types of transactions is that you can copy from one to another. So you can go from quote to order, delivery, etc. So copy from, or you can do a copy to. So whichever transaction that you want to be on to start the journey. The quote we've mentioned already, what it is and how it doesn't commit the stock yet or services, but all you're doing is making a proposal of a sale to your customer or your prospect. The order is different because this is what you would like to record as the stock that you'd like to record or order for the customer. So this is now committed. And of course, if it's actual stock, it will reduce your available stock, which is the calculated quantity. So accordingly, so this is going to be your committed stock quantity on the system. A sales order does not affect your final customer balance because we haven't actually invoiced them yet. So there's no financial account posting yet on a sales order. And as I've said, this can be then copied on to a sales delivery, which of course will effectively reduce the stock totals. Orders can be back orders, back-to-back orders between sales and purchasing as well. So you can perform those within the actions menu. So that's where, of course, you've copied part of the order to a delivery and left some lines open. So you've got just a simple back order, or you want to ensure that stock is also purchased from the relevant supplier, so you can do a back-to-back between your sales and your purchases. Sales deliveries. So of course, delivering the goods to your customer, ultimately what happens there is you have committed the stock and now you've reduced the stock quantity by creating that delivery. So your in-stock totals will be reduced, and of course, instantly there's a financial impact by adding that particular sales delivery. You can schedule deliveries for van drivers on the mobile app. So that's utilizing our delivery app to bring those and to schedule those deliveries then for the actual van driver to ensure stock and to record receipt of the stock on site. And of course, ultimately, a delivery can be brought through to a sales invoice where you can get paid. And I mentioned already, you can use the returns option to receive returned deliveries. So where faulty goods or it's perhaps damaged during transit and the customer is refusing to accept delivery of the items. All of the above, lots of different reasons why. And of course, ultimately then everything comes to an invoice. And we all know an invoice is a legally required document. This is your final document. It's proof of the goods and services that you've supplied to your customer. It will, of course, affect your accounting. So the values, for example, for tax, profit and loss, the balance sheet, which is your aged debtors, so your profit and loss, which is your revenue account. And this is effectively, this is your request for payment from your customer. So this is where it all resides. I want to mention at this point in time as well around sales reserve invoices. So it's another way of invoicing your customer, but primarily it's what we would deem a pro forma invoice or like a pro forma invoice where you want to invoice goods in advance of delivery. So this in advance of delivery and get paid in advance of the delivery landing out on your customer premises. So that's what the sales reserve invoice is used for. So like a pro forma basis where you can commit the stock. So the committed stock increases, the customer balance, the sales revenue, etc. gets posted as a result of the sales revenue. You can get paid. So you can enter part payment or full payment against the reserve invoice. So if you want to ensure that that's done in advance. So when the delivery is added, stock will be updated, the cost of sales, and of course the P&L. So everything at that point from a stock perspective is updated when the delivery is added. And of course, ultimately then bringing that to a close when it's fully paid, then the reserve invoice is fully committed. Just to mention as well, we do have the option of a deposit invoice. And this is where you can define a deposit stock item, which is basically a non-stock item. And as part of the invoicing process or as part of, the sales order, you can collect a deposit on the sales order. So if you want to ensure if there's a particular customer and a particular value on that particular order and you want to collect part of the payment or to get a pro forma invoice done for that collection of the deposit itself, you can do that directly from a sales order as well. So there is information available on our help centre around how to use the deposit function. We have also, as of this week, and the reason why I'm mentioning that is that we've also introduced the deposit function on purchase orders. So again, where you can collect payment in advance of delivery itself as well. And that can be done directly from a purchase order. So for a sales order or a purchase order, or if you need the pro forma invoice, you can do it this way through the reserve. So lots of different things to consider and functionality to utilize. And of course, your sales credit note. It cancels or reverses a sales invoice. It does affect your stock. If you have stock, it will affect the stock. It affects your tax, profit and loss and balance sheet. The service option, of course, does not affect stock. The same for any of our service transactions. They don't affect stock. There's no stock being held at that point in time. When to use a credit note, it's always a question that pops up in support. And we'd always say, if you want to cancel an invoice, which I've mentioned there, cancel or reverse an invoice, it's the best way to do it because you're creating an audit trail in the system from a transactional point of view, but more importantly, from an accounting point of view as well, to bring that through to credit note. Lots of tips and tricks around the system. And again, I believe that these are all being underused on the system. I always mention that these are lots of things you can do. So you've got the actions menu here to start off with. So against all of your different transactions, particularly on sales and your leads, when you click on the actions menu, there's lots of different things that you can now do for each of those transactions. Obviously, follow. This is your notification. How do I follow this transaction to be notified of any changes? Closing out the document, send. The send piece I mentioned already about the advanced emailing to ensure that, for example, that you create an activity when it's emailed. Or if you want to include pay to Stripe, for example, if you want to ensure that you've got a click to pay and they pay through your Stripe account, you can also do that through the send option. Printing and downloading reports, adding a related activity to a transaction. Yes, you can do that here. See the relationship map, and that's important. That's your audit trail. So from quote to order to delivery, perhaps there's multiple deliveries or multiple orders, and you've now reached the final invoice and you want to see the journey from quote right through to invoice. So that's your audit trail for each of those transactions. Duplicate, so if you need to duplicate a transaction, and just using the same information, but maybe post that to a different customer, for example. Creating service calls, that's all around the project management. That's something that we will touch on in more detail in the service module. And of course, if I want to set a transaction as recurring, and that's if I want that transaction to repeat. And I mentioned that at the very outset around license agreements, around your sales invoicing, for example, and that's where you can utilize the recurring option. Here we have the copy to option. So when you're in, for example, this is what you will see if I am in a sales order screen. It'll give me the option to copy to sales delivery, copy to sales invoice, or copy to sales reserve invoice. If I am already in the delivery or in, for example, my invoice, this is what this screen is showing me. So I'm in the invoice screen, and now I've clicked on the copy from option. So I can say, well, I want to copy from these deliveries or these orders or these quotes, for example. It performs exactly the same function to link those transactions through. On the grid itself, there's loads of options as well, loads of quick actions that you can perform on a lot of the grids. If you right click, for example, on your sales order grid or your sales invoice grid, you will see a certain amount of actions that you can perform on those grids. Remember to always consider if the transaction is open or closed. What actions are available to you directly from the grid. So this one, actually, we're looking at an invoice grid. And when I right click, I have an option to pay, to cancel, to edit, to copy to duplicate, to download. So there are certain key pieces of information that I can do. If the invoice is already paid, I'm not going to see the pay option. So always consider, is my transaction open or is my transaction closed? And of course, you have your sales dashboard to give you all of the relevant analytics and KPIs. And of course, for those enterprise users, we also have a sales reports menu, which gives you access to the different PDF reports available within the system. So sales revenue, top sales, sales KPIs, and again, there's different filters that you can perform against each of those. And there's the reports option there. And of course, the notification center. What are my activities for today against some of the sales transactions, for example? Again, there's initial setups that are required for sales. I mentioned already about the default price list, there's also a default option for tax. Is it coming from the item codes or from the companies, which is your customers? Gross profit calculations, different hide options, mandatory, which I've mentioned about the mandatory reference. The whole thing around gross profit and gross profit calculation, I will go into that in full detail in the first lesson on stock. So do bear with me on that. There is quite a lot to go through, so we won't go through that today, but just to make you aware of that, that is one of the settings that you can access. And you can see that here just in settings, module settings, and we've got some of the settings options that you can have here with regards to default price lists, which is for estimation on the sales mobile app, and of course gross profit, whether or not we have default VAT tax codes, and there's plenty more that we've introduced as well. We've got lots around the advanced sales. Again, I've mentioned those in the very outset. I'm not going to go through those in great detail at the moment. So we've got the recurring sales. So if you want something to recur, we've got the email and billing, which is to bulk email or to bulk convert. So I mentioned about having multiple deliveries, for example. And what if for a specific customer, you want to take those, let's say there's 10 deliveries, and take them all through to one invoice without having to go into the invoice screen? You can do that very easily. Using the email and billing screen, you can manage all those conversions directly and consolidate and manage them directly from the email and billing screen. For multiple consolidation, to one single document or to multiple documents, whatever it is that you require. And of course, the same as well with your statements. You can run those off to email or to print. So it's important that you get familiar with each of those screens and make them work better for you. And resource planning, scheduling your orders, deliveries for the van drivers to appear on the mobile apps, or if you want to schedule activities, etc., you can do that all through the resource planning. Recurring sales, very simply, sorry, just to go back to that there for 1 second, all you're doing there is you've got actions to set for recurring, you choose your frequency, and then we have a grid where you can monitor those postings. So what you see there is you'll see the number of transactions posted so far, and if for any reason you want to prevent further recurring postings for particular transactions, you have an option there to cancel that recurrence. Okay, so lots around recurring transactions. And we've already spoken there all around the email and billing and what that means for you. And we also have an option there as well around email and billing. With advanced emailing, you can, this is a new piece of functionality we introduced a couple of months ago, where you can email or CC emails to another address. So if, for example, you have a central repository for yourself, for example, info at or accounts at, and you want to make sure that everything that has gone out through email and billing also reaches you so that the customer can't say, well, actually, you didn't get a copy of that. I didn't get a copy. It didn't go out. If you have a central email address, you want to ensure that also comes into their inbox to collect on those. You can populate a CC to another email address. You can assign multiple contacts as billing contacts, and that's done through your contacts tab on your customer setup. So that's to ensure that multiple persons receive the billing information. So if a customer has a designated department of contacts for billing purposes, you can ensure that all of those contacts are reached all at the same time. And of course, I did mention already through the advanced emailing that you can create an activity as a record of those emails going out to your customers as well. So a demonstration of that is here just in terms of consolidation. You can see here when we're in, for example, the email and billing, and we're on a sales quote, there's an action here to copy it to sales order, sales delivery, to sales invoice. And you can decide then, of course, by selecting the different transactions to email them, which ones to email, to copy to, if you're doing consolidation, for example, or run your multiple statements from here as well. And of course, resource planning, there's lots around resource planning of what you can do with regards to resource planning and customize it and make it work for you as well in terms of the view that you see in the resource planner. So familiarize yourself with that as well as you use the system. So you can see there, I'm just showing it here to you where you, on the resource planner itself, you can plan orders, plan activities. I can specify the user, the van driver, for example. I can create custom views, custom dates, specific warehouse that I want to plan deliveries for, specific owner, all of the above. And I can also customize that in terms of colors. So for example, I might want to decide, well, actually orders need to be pink, deliveries need to be green, services might want to be another color. So I can customize that and make that work for me as well on the setup of the resource planner. So you can see there, I can perform different filters. I can look at the timeline on a different week. I can do a different employee selection. So if I have multiple, and this is the calendar view for customizing. How do I want to look at that view? How deep is the view? And then these are the filter planners. So this is the color. So make it work for you. That's the whole idea around the resource planner. So the customer portal is just a window that you give your customers to looking at certain information. So you could decide based on the settings. And by the way, we've got a new settings coming around the customer portal, which will be made available to you probably at the end of November. And the whole idea here is to give your customers a view into their transactions that you've been adding into the system for them. So whether or not they can view and create service calls, add activities to those service calls, view sales transactions, send a quote for approval. That's where you can send your quotes for approval. Add sales orders. Can they add a sales order? Pay outstanding invoices, pay the bills, They can maintain their customer account, so if they have any new contacts, they could add them in there, or simply download their customer statement. So giving your customer power and accessibility to their transactions and enabling them to manage their data for you, but without too much input. Obviously, you still have control on that and you decide what information is accessible. So that's what I'm talking about here. It's all around empowerment, empowering the customers. Do you want them to create new service calls? Do you want them to see all the different transactions? Do you want them to create a new sales order, for example, on the system? Do you want them to view their invoices and pay them directly on the portal itself? So all of that can be managed and maintained for your customers as well. So lots coming around the Customer One portal, as I said, starting with the new settings screen, which will be landing at a screen near you soon. I'd say probably by the end of November, we should have that up and running live for everyone. Lots of questions, guys, and I appreciate we have gone well over time, and I appreciate you staying on board to take that, to take all of this information on board. And obviously, I know we've absolutely run out, and I appreciate if you want to disappear, but I did obviously want to touch base on the live system and just to show you that this information does all exist and where it's all currently housed. A lot of questions there around the notification center. So maybe that's one thing I'll just focus on really quickly here on the live demonstration. So this is, if we go to your home screen here and up the top here, your notification center. You can see here I have a couple of notifications in for today, and I've actually got something here in my activities as well. If I go to the notification center here at the top, and if we just click on the notification center, so this is where you can set your parameters. So if you go in here to settings, this is where you can switch on and off all the different transactions that you want to follow. So you will only see in here what you are allowed to see. That is based on your permissions that you have as an end user. You will only see the certain information that you're allowed to see, but you can specify, do I see all new orders that are added, all new returns, all new invoices, all new credit notes, all Stripe payments, etc. Can I see all those coming through? Where I have actioned and followed a transaction, so that's through here. If I have subscribed and set a transaction to follow, and again, that was one of the key questions that was asked. So for example, let me really quickly just show you this here. If I drill in, for example, to a sales order, I'm going to just take one that's open. This is the primary thing here, important with the status. If we drill in here to the sales order itself, you can see here that I have a bell. And if I click on the bell, confirm object subscription, okay to that, you are now following this document. So the key here is that any time that any changes are made to that particular document, so you can see here, I'm now following. If there's any changes made, I will be notified here in the notification center, and I can see all of the different transactions that I'm following as well through the notification center. So a very key piece of the system to monitor and to be aware of throughout. Well, guys, thank you ever so much for joining me today. I appreciate you staying on well past the allotted time. There was a lot of information to go through, and I truly appreciate all of the questions that you brought to me there, all very relevant to the subject matter on CRM and sales. So take the time after we put the recording up, take the time to review everything that we've covered off today. And as always, if you have any questions, send them through to support. And don't forget, as always, to check out the Help Centre. So if you're new to the system, we have a Help Centre, which is help.enterpryze.com. We always post the latest release information in the news and update, which is the first category at the very top. You will see the latest release information with a click through to our demonstrations. So that's where you can literally step through the changes on screen and find out exactly how to utilize each of those new key pieces of functionality. So next up, we'll have everything around services and particularly around projects and managing services, and a lot of new great functionality that we've also introduced around services in the current release. But thank you all so much for staying on board for such a lengthy session today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I certainly look forward to seeing you on the next module. Thank you.